Hey everyone, it's Rachel Rummage here for our third debate topic. After watching the videos, doing the interactive activities, I decided to go out on a limb and choose topic B after looking at the discussion posts and seeing that no one had really done that one yet. So for topic B, it says the civil rights and anti-poverty movements of the 60s and 70s led to the reduction in health gap and disparities between Black and white Americans, and there is no need to bring up or reform these topics again in 2025. I chose to do the pro stance, and my first claim for this is that the civil rights movement accomplished its main goal of health equity, legally dismantling segregation and causing a national standard of justice for access to health care. The first proof I have for this is that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the imposition of Medicare in 1966, which put non-discrimination through Title IX as a condition of the federal hospital funding, put an end to segregated inferior hospital systems. This was the largest, most effective structural health reform in the history of this country, and it fulfilled the ethical imperative of justice by assuring that every person had a legal right to equal health care. The structural need was fundamentally set right in the 60s and 70s. To tie this back into the unnatural causes videos, these movements directly attacked the institutional power structures which maintained the separate and unequal systems which the Unnatural Causes series identified with as the primary engineer of health inequity. Since there is no longer a legal bias of segregation at this turn of the century, the main structural problem which called for the reform has been addressed. The War on Poverty successfully intervened on the core social determinants of health with the establishment of permanent government programs that addresses the upstream causes of disparity, proving that this model from the 60s and 70s stands the test of time. That's my claim number 2. My proof for this is that the programs initiated during this era, such as the community health centers, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, or SNAP, and WIC directly intervene with the social determinants of health touched on by the Unnatural Causes series. So that includes neighborhood quality, income, and food security. These programs embodied the ethical principles of beneficence, or doing good, by changing the focus of public health from individual behavior to social environment. The ethical warrant for this proof is this commitment to public health beneficence that has been institutionalized through these ongoing programs. It is not that we do not have the programs to address the social determinants of health or the external indicators of public health in the conditions of wealth and inequity in the U.S. today. It is that we have an adequate permanent safety net created by the reform of the 60s and 70s that need simply to be used and not changed. My third claim for this stance is the overall historical data illustrates a great and lasting lessening of the black to white life expectancy gap, which followed the movement, showing that the existing reforms were most successful and sufficient. My proof for this is that the life expectancy gap, some gaps continue to exist, of course, but the life expectancy that previously existed as of the 60s has been dramatically life expectancy gap that has existed as of the 60s has been dramatically reduced. This situation is the best proof that the radical changes in the laws and policies worked out in the 60s and 70s were effective as anticipated. The social gradient referred in the Unnatural Causes video was immensely decreased, not by new policies in 2025, but by the actions of the 60s and 70s. And the second proof for this is the conclusion on reform. Since the most important gap, the overall length of life, was so much affected by these movements, the demand for entirely new systemic reform would seem to be an overreaction. This gap that still exists are of little account and are now questions of implementation rather than the terms of the system. I think the counterclaims or the cons for this side would say that the arguments presented by the cons will focus on the observable and undeniable evidence that we have still been unable to address the glaring problem of Black maternal mortality and chronic disease incidence that exists today, as evidence that the movements of the 60s and 70s were unsuccessful in destroying the institutional racism. Therefore, calls for greater reform requiring deeper levels of change and new, less desirable programs are required. So that's my take on it. And I look forward to watching your videos. I hope y'all have a good one. Thanks. Bye.